Welcome everybody. My name is Jason Spiller. I just started co-hosting this a few months ago, and by luck my co-host has been at a conference the last meeting, now is on a family vacation. I don't know if he planned it that way. But this is Front Range Front End, and we primarily tackle vanilla HTML, vanilla CSS, JavaScript, maybe some Sass here and there. But we are doing a series of talks. Last month we did React. CJ Reynolds will be doing Vue this month. We're going to have hopefully a GDE, a Google Developer Engineer or Google Developer Expert to do Angular next month. So if you've never seen Angular, really good. The guy that, again, hopefully is doing it, just spoke at NGConf, their main conference. So that will be awesome. And then to placate my co-host, because he works in Ember, we're also going to be doing Ember. We'll probably skip July, so Ember will be in August. Free beer in the back. Hopefully we're working on food sponsor. We had it once. It was very nice. Drove a lot of people here. So hopefully they'll be coming. Watch the meetup for that. Anybody have any announcements? Anyone want to plug their own meetup or companies hiring, anything like that? Please.
The Motley Fool, which is located in Lakewood, they're a financial company, but we're hiring for mid to senior full stack and front end devs. We use Vue and then Django Python for the back end. So if anybody is interested, you can go online and check them out.
My first design job out of college was with Rocky Mountain News. And I remember the Motley Fool was one of my favorite parts of the paper, because papers were just everywhere in every break room. So I love the Motley Fool. Anybody else? All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our host. I would try to do a good introduction, so I was going to say, I've seen you do it and it's great. So everybody, please give a hand for CJ Reynolds.
As you mentioned, I'm CJ. There are very few of us here today, so can we just go around, say your name, and then if you already know Vue.js, what's one thing you like about Vue.js, or what's one thing you like about JavaScript, or what's one thing you like about React, or whatever else you use? Let's start here.
All right, my name is Butter. I've recently been looking at Vue, and I've been pretty interested in learning more about it. So I'm just happy to see that it's picked up more traction amongst the community. And one thing that I liked about it was the fact that I could set everything up I wanted in the CLI, and I didn't have to just do create React app and then search for what I needed, or what was the best, or what was this.
Absolutely.
So.
I have the exact same experience.
Yes.
Jason.
Jason Spiller. Haven't gotten past the tutorial, guided kind of app with Vue. But one thing that I really liked about it in that very cursory experience is that the CSS is also included right in the file with the component, instead of it having to be a whole nother, library of quote components and React. So that's probably the thing I'm liking the most so far.
Cool. Is it Jason?
Jace.
Jason. Jace.
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 My name is Jace. I like Vue for how it kind of meets you where you are in whatever scope your project's in. You can drop it in and do something small with it, or you can make a full page out of it, a full SPA out of it. So, at work, it integrates well with some of our React apps, and it can plug into our Angular apps. Sort of just consume it, and it's really versatile, and so helps our design system to be more helpful, that it can be used in other contexts.
Cool. Everybody just loves Vue. I don't even have to.
I'm Alan. What those two guys just said is really what resonated with me. Because I'm just new to it, so I really wanted to jump in, but it seems simple. I like that it's all consolidated in one file. You've got those three parts in it. But it does look like you can just drop a little piece in and get started with it. Any other app that you've got currently, and a good way to enter into it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So at Clayton, same kind of thing, the incrementally adaptable, use for a widget, build up your components from there, kind of pick and choose. But, yeah, just getting started.
Definitely.
I'm Lindsay. I would reiterate what everybody else said. We use it within our Django templates, so it's only used when we need some interactivity on the page. But I will also say the documentation is great, so I think that's a big plus.
Cool.
My name's Randy, and I looked into the Vue when I saw the meetup and working on a new project, and I saw it has a lot of front end, or it looked like it had a lot of front end elements. So I wanted to check it out, see if maybe it would be something we could use.
Cool.
David, basically looking for a lightweight front end, responsive, reactive, blah, blah, blah. Don't particularly care for the rolling in of everything into a single file. Looking at it coming from some Angular background, kind of like the components separated out. But nonetheless, we want something that we can prototype quickly with. CLI works for that. And you don't need a heavyweight platform like Angular in the complexity of React.
Cool.
I'm Cass. Everybody's kind of already said everything, so I'll just go the emotional route. Every other front-end framework that I've worked with, which is pretty much everything except for Ember, it just makes me frustrated, and Vue does not. So.
Cool. So I'm actually live streaming this. Like I didn't live stream that part. I'm about to show my face and go live, but there are 31 people watching, so that's cool.
Cool.
And let's get this started. Hello world. We are live from the Front Range Front End Meetup. My name is CJ. You can find me as CJ on Denver Devs. My email is cj@null.computer. That's a real internet address. My GitHub is w3cj. My website is w3cj.sh. And I have a YouTube channel called Coding Garden with CJ, and that's where this is being streamed right now. And, oh yeah, check that out. Okay. So first we'll talk about who am I. Then I'm going to try to get to know you all a little better. I know we already kind of went around, but I'll have some questions for you. I'll talk about what is Vue.js, give a brief history, and then we'll do I was going to say deep dive. We'll do a dive into Vue and talk about all the things that it has, and then we'll also talk about the Vue.js community. So first, who am I? My name is CJ. I'm a full stack developer, an educator, and a maker. I have worn many hats in my career, including instructor, software engineer, QA analyst, system administrator, help desk consultant, and currently I am a lead full stack developer at a company called 303 Software. We are a consultancy that builds applications for really anyone that's looking to build an application. So we have clients that are startups that need an app built, we'll build it for them. We have clients that are larger corporations that need some maybe augmentation work or an internal app built for them, and we do that as well. So I've been there about 6 months, and it's awesome. What is this next slide? Oh yeah, so as I mentioned, I have a YouTube channel. I stream about all kinds of things. So I have videos on intro to TypeScript and Angular, intro to Vuex and state management, an intro to Vuetify, which is a component framework for Vue.js, and lots of other kinds of videos that I've done as well. Has anyone here heard of or watched Coding Train on YouTube? Cool. I was actually on his show in New York City because I taught there for a while, and then he had seen my channel, and I got to do that. I don't know. It was super awesome, super fun. And I'm also the organizer of the Denver Vue Meetup. So we're always looking for food and drink sponsors, and always looking for full talk and lightning talk speakers. So if anyone here decides to pick up Vue and maybe you want to give a talk on Vue for beginners, or your opinions about it after using something else, I'm totally open to it. Just reach out to me. And yes, I have worked with a lot of front-end frameworks, and so this is kind of where all of this is coming from, and my opinions are coming from. So I worked with Angular 1 for over 2 years, have several apps in production. I worked and working with React and Redux for over 2 years, have several apps in production, and have been working with Vue.js for about 2 years. And aside from that, being an instructor, I was, not anymore, I mean, kind of I do the video thing, but created all sorts of small toy projects to kind of like really demonstrate the underlying concepts in a lot of these frameworks. So I played around with a lot of this stuff, and that's where all of this is coming from today. So let's find out, who are you? Who writes JavaScript daily? Raise a hand. Pretty much everyone, sort of. Yeah, cool. And who has used a front-end JavaScript framework? Pretty much everyone, cool. Let's do a survey. Who uses React? Who uses Angular 1? Angular 2+? Ember? What else? Shout it out.
You.
Vue. Oh yeah, cool. Anything else? Cool. And I don't want to neglect the chat. I'm just going to catch up on the chat really quick. So many people. Hello, everyone. I'm not going to say all of your names. Yeah, I actually do have a LaCroix today. It is passion fruit flavor. And yes, the lights are off, but I think you can still see me okay. Okay. I guess we already went around, but who has heard of Vue.js before this talk? I think pretty much everyone. Yeah. And who has never used Vue.js? Not even a little bit? Okay, we're going to learn a ton. And who has used Vue.js? I know there are a few people that are actually using Vue.js. Cool. And wait. And yeah, who uses it daily? Like, who's using it at their job? Cool. This is like, I gave the same talk for like over 100 people, and this is more hands than was at that time. But that was like a year and a half ago, so like that just shows you how much Vue.js is growing. Cool. Okay, so let's talk about what is Vue.js. I am first going to give you all the bullet points from their website and try to sell it to you, but Vue.js is billed as the progressive JavaScript framework. It is a progressive, incrementally adoptable JavaScript framework for building UI on the web. But what does that mean? So typically when you're building front-end applications, there are lots of pieces and lots of scales of apps. You could have really small apps or really big apps. And Vue.js is with you no matter really what you're building. So at its core, it has a declarative rendering syntax. So that's for defining your views in relation to some sort of data. But that is at its core, you have that declarative rendering. It also has a component system, which works extremely well for building component hierarchies and using code. They have client-side routing if you need that. They have large-scale state management if you need that. Typically, when you use the CLI, you have a build system that's up and ready to go for you. And you can also do like client-server data persistence. But this slide really just shows that when you start with Vue.js, you don't have to use all of this. Like, you can start from the most simplest app and not have routing or not have large-scale state management, but you can still use Vue.js. So it is incrementally adoptable. And when we're talking about front-end frameworks, this is typically what we're talking about. So in modern front-end frameworks, typically you separate your view from your data or your state. So in this case, our state might just be a plain JavaScript object. It's an object of properties that's tracking all of the things in the UI that might be changing. And then you have a view that you write and declare in terms of that data. So you say the title goes here, or for every element in this array, we're going to display its name property here, but you do it in a declarative way. And then there's a render process. So a user will interact with the web page. This will change your underlying state, and then the framework handles updating your view based on that changed state. So pretty much every front-end framework works in this way, and this is how Vue.js works as well. And here are the bullet points from the website. It's approachable, already know HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, read the guide, and start building things in no time. It is versatile, an incrementally adoptable ecosystem that scales between a library and a full-featured framework. So that was that image that I showed earlier. And lastly, it is performant. So it is only 20 kilobytes when it's minified and gzipped. It has a blazing fast virtual DOM implementation, which ultimately results in minimal optimization efforts. So typically you can just build the app, not have to worry about optimizing, and everything just works wonderfully. Okay. Let's talk about a brief history of Vue.js. So Vue.js was created in 2013 by Evan You while he was working at Google. And I'm going to read this excerpt from an article. I have the article linked here. Can't quite see it, but all of these slides are at git.io/overvue. So if you go there, you can see these slides. But this is a quote from Evan You. My job at Google involved a lot of prototyping in the browser. We had this idea and we wanted to get something tangible as fast as possible. Some of the project used Angular at the time, and for me, Angular offered something cool, which is data binding and a data-driven way of dealing with a DOM. So you don't have to touch the DOM yourself. It also brought in all these extra concepts that force you to structure the code the way it wanted you to. It just felt too heavy for the use case I had at the time. I figured, what if I could just extract that part that I really liked about Angular and build something really lightweight without all the extra concepts involved? Enter Vue.js. And so a lot of people might describe Vue.js as kind of like the middle ground between Angular 1 and React. And it absolutely is. I kind of like to think about it as the Angular 2 that never was. Like Angular 2 was a complete rewrite, they changed everything. If you've used Angular 1 before, you're gonna see a lot of things similar in Vue.js. So I really think like Vue.js is the Angular 2 that kind of never happened. In terms of some notable events, so it was first released to GitHub in 2014. I believe this is a link to a blog post where Evan Yu talks about, I think it was maybe not his first open source project, but it's actually a post just about how to market an open source project and how he dealt with all of that. In April 2015, Taylor Otwell made a tweet. Anyone here use Laravel PHP? No. But he is the creator of Laravel, but he did this tweet here. Current React learning status, overwhelmed. Learning Vue.js because it looks easy and has a pretty website. So this one tweet, because he is like an influencer in the community, got a lot of people interested in Vue.js. Version 2.0 of Vue was released in September of 2016. This was the release that introduced the virtual DOM and really made it a serious competitor with React. The first official conference happened in June 2017. This is really just to show that there's a large enough community that they're actually having conferences around it now. It's interesting to note that the following of Vue.js in Europe and in Asia is huge. It's much, much bigger than the United States. So a lot of times when you're looking at Vue forums or if you're on the Vue Discord, there are people of all nationalities and languages asking questions about Vue. And for some reason, it's just not, it hadn't been picking up as fast in the US. It is now, and I have some stuff to show you for that. But Vue.js is not just some fad, it's not just some trend or some toy project. Like, it is real, people are using it, it's awesome. In 2017, it was the single most starred repo on GitHub. I don't think that was, I forgot where I got this from. I don't think this is the most stars, but I think specifically in 2017, it got the most stars on it for that 1 year. There was VueConf Amsterdam in February of 2018, VueConf New Orleans in March of 2018, which I went to. Just in March of this year, there was VueConf in Florida, and in June of last year, Vue surpassed React in GitHub star count. There's actually a tweet from Dan Abramov, who's a core contributor to React and the creator of Redux, but he tweeted, "Congratulations to Vue.js for surpassing React star count on GitHub." And he actually caught somebody made a website, has Vue passed React yet? And he took a screenshot right when it said yes. So, so those are notable events. And I'll kind of talk about the growth of Vue. So this is from Evan Yu's slide at VueConf 2018. And it just showed between 2016 and 2018, there was huge growth. Like just in the year 2018 alone, 122% growth in number of stars on GitHub, 400% growth in number of weekly downloads on NPM, 300% growth in number of active users of the Vue DevTools. And then I have some current numbers for today. So in terms of Vue.js today, it has 137,000 stars on GitHub, which is insane. And I have this chart here which actually compares it. These are the number of GitHub stars over time, and the blue line here is Facebook React. The green line is Angular, Angular IO, like the Angular 2+. The red line is Angular 1, and this orange line, which currently has the most, is Vue.js. So you can kind of see over time how these things have either waned or gained in popularity, and this is the inflection point where Vue surpassed React in at least popularity. But one of the key things you might want to look at, it's not just, okay, somebody can star the repo, but does that mean they're actually using it? But the Vue.js dev tools, which have tools for managing your state and inspecting your components, I think these stats are from like a month ago. They have 780,000 weekly active users. So that means there are at least 780,000 active Vue.js developers that are using the Vue dev tools. It has roughly 1 million downloads a week on NPM, over 500 million hits a month on JS Deliver. Ultimately, all this is to say Vue.js is here to stay. It's very popular. People are loving it. And this is a timeline of all of the versions. Can anyone notice something interesting about this? I'll give you 10 seconds.
You mean the movie reference?
There are references to movies and other things. Anime. Yeah, there is. Anybody notice anything else about them?
Are they all cyberpunk?
No. Look at the first looker.
Alphabetical
Yeah,
order.
they're so the versions have actually been named after anime in alphabetical order. So like version 9 was Animatrix, version 0.10 was Blade Runner. Though I think this was actually a movie. Was there an anime called Blade Runner?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I don't know. But the rest of them are anime. And the recent 2.6 which was released just back in February, is called Macross. C, D, E, F, G. Wait. Yeah, you can see that F is missing. It was actually Full Metal Alchemist. And that was reserved for like a sub-version 1 release. But interesting note about the versions. Okay, so now we're going to get into it. We're going to write some Vue. We're going to talk about it. We'll first talk about how do you get started if you never have before. I'll show you the CLI and all the cool things you can do with it, and then we'll show some of the concepts in Vue.js. Thoughts, comments, questions on anything I've talked about so far before we get into this part? Nope. Cool. There's a question in the YouTube chat from Yossi. He says, no releases in 2018. Not that I could find, and I thought that was weird as well. There are subversion releases, not subversion, but patch versions, so like 2.5.1, 2.5.2. Those things were released in 2018, but the minor version bump, the second number here, the latest one was in 2019. Cool, good question. Oh, and Rand got it correct in the chat. It is alphabetical. All right. So this is a basic example of how you can build a Vue.js app. This is literally all that you need. You create a Vue instance, you tell it what element to attach to, give it some data, and then render it on the page. And I want to show a quick demo of that. I'll just do it locally. Let's make a directory called getting started. Everyone see that? We're just going to create an index.html file. And we will create an HTML document. I don't have the full snippet. Where did it go?
Exclamation point. Oh, just be it.
We'll do it?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I've never used it. Like, usually HTML works for me. Cool. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to bring in Vue.js, but just as a CDN link. So we're not going to be using Webpack. We don't have to use any dev tools or anything like that. I'm literally just going to put the script tag in here like you would do with like jQuery or something like that. So for this, I'm going to use unpackage. This is a service that serves up packages that are on NPM, but as a CDN. So you can actually just say, I want unpackage Vue, and that'll bring in the latest stable version of that package as a script. Great, now we need to create our Vue instance. My editor is like not doing the autocomplete. Did I name it the right thing? Okay, so first thing we'll do is we'll create an app. We'll set it equal to a new Vue instance. And first thing you do is you tell Vue where is this application going to live. So L stands for element, and we're going to say we're going to put it on the element with ID app, and then we can give it some data. In this case, data is just an object. Here we'll have a title that says hello, front, range, front, end, meetup. Cool. And then we actually need the template on the page where this thing can render, and for that we can just use, let's use like a main. We'll give it the ID of app, so that matches up right here. And then inside of it, we can use handlebar syntax to actually reference anything from our data. So if I throw like an H1 right there, I can say title, and this should show us the title. Let's start it up. I'm gonna use light server if I have it. Cool. Hello, front range front-end meetup. Yay. Cool. And that's as easy as it is to get started with Vue.js. So what I like about this is you don't have to download a heavyweight CLI. You don't have to learn really anything new. Probably the newest thing here, if you're already like a front-end developer, is maybe handlebars. But this is one of the things I like about Vue.js. It's really simple, really easy to get started. But with a larger app, you're probably not going to do this. And I'll show how to use the CLI, which introduces build tools and plugins and routing and state management. But if you're really just looking to get started or doing quick prototypes, this works beautifully. I think I can do this too. So just as a demo. Whoa. So because I stored the app as a variable, and in this case it's a global variable, I can actually change its data properties and the Vue instantly updates. So that's just a preview of the kind of thing that you get with Vue.js. And again, you wouldn't do this in a real app. You don't want like global variables hanging around like that, but I'll show how all of that works. Also, let's check out the docs. Vue.js has some of the best documentation that I have ever used or seen. It's just a joy to work in. They have tons of examples. They have a cookbook which has like real world examples. So people building larger applications, things in production, they have examples of how they've solved certain problems. That's in the cookbook somewhere down here. But in just the documentation itself, they showed that basic example there. And what I think is cool is in the documentation, if you open up the dev tools, each one of these app variables that they have in their examples is actually available in the console. So like, similar to what I did, they have this element here that's rendering message. They're creating a Vue instance, putting in a variable called app, and that's rendering right here as hello Vue. But if I say app.message equals hello you, it instantly updates. So as you're perusing the docs, you can actually play around with these examples, which is pretty sweet. So I think this shows an example of like how you can bind the hover text here to be to have the date of when the component loaded. So it's actually like using expression and dynamic data. This shows you how to do conditionals. So notice that in our data here, it says scene equals true. I'm going to talk about directives in a second. That's what this is. But this is saying, if scene is true, show this element. But if I say app3.scene equals false, what's going to happen?
Go away.
It disappears, yeah. So it's actually listening for changes to that property, and if it changes, it won't show that element, which is sweet. So just wanted to point out the docs. I have lots of other stuff to show you as well. Questions or thoughts about this? All right, let's keep going. So let's talk about the Vue.js CLI. So the CLI version 2 is the older one, but it was template based. So you installed it by doing npm install -g vue CLI, and if you wanted to create a project, you used one of the available templates. So they had simple, they had webpack simple, browserify, webpack, but basically the template had all of the predefined files and like webpack configurations, and the CLI would essentially expand that in your current directory, and that's what would give you the Vue.js app. And you could also use custom templates. So if your company had a template that they wanted to reuse, you could do vue init and specify a GitHub repo. It would actually use that as the template. But now, the current and super awesome thing is the Vue CLI 3. And this uses a plugin-based architecture. So instead of having a template of predefined files, every piece of your app, whether it's the state management or the routing or the CSS preprocessors, all of those are built as plugins. So you can generate your app, and then you get to choose what plugins you want initially, but then later on, let's say you do want to add something else, you can simply just install that plugin. The other cool thing about it is it hides the webpack config from you, but unlike React, so who here uses React? Who here has had to eject your React webpack scripts? Yeah, it's not fun. So basically, React hides the Webpack config from you, but if you ever want to customize it, you have to eject it, and that just puts a bunch of tons of files in your folder that you now have to customize. With Vue, you don't have to eject. They have a way of, if you want to modify the Webpack config, you can actually just specify the settings which will be modified, and it automatically gets merged in. I've done a whole talk on the Vue CLI. It's a beautiful thing. You can install it like this. So npm install -g at vue/CLI. And then you do vue create and then the name of your project. So let's do that right now. Yeah, so we're gonna do vue create front range front end demo. And then we get to choose our options. So I think basic and default might have been ones I saved in the past, but here I'm gonna manually select features. I'm gonna say, I definitely wanna use Babel. Could use TypeScript if I wanted to, could add PWA support. Right now, I'm just gonna add the router, Vuex, and CSS preprocessors. So later on, if I get a chance to demo those, it'll be already set up. You can set up unit testing. You have the option between Mocha Chai and Jest. And with end-to-end testing, you have the option between Nightwatch and Cypress. I'm not gonna set up testing right now because it takes longer to install. But this is just the basic questions you get asked for generating an app. And then for the router, it's asking me if I want to use history mode. I'm just going to say no. It's essentially whether or not the hash is in the URL for routes. And then which CSS preprocessor do I want to use? I'm just going to use Dart Sass. I like the Airbnb ESLint config. We're going to lint our stuff. And I like to keep them inside, all of the configs inside of my package.json. Now that I answered all of those questions, I could save this as a preset. Calling it like my app config, and then next time I don't have to answer all of these questions, I can just choose the preset. I'm not going to do that here, and it will generate it. Is there anything else I want to say on that? No. Any questions? My slideshow was detecting changes and died. Cool.
Is that better for you, CJ?
I don't mind either way. Can you all still see?
Okay,
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
Sunsets.
Cool. So that. Wait. Just want to get my slide deck going again. Should be changing files. Okay, cool. But that generated my app and created a folder called Front Range Front End Demo. So I'm going to go into that folder. And we'll open up code inside of this folder, and I'll show you what you get with a generated app. So you have your Babel config here. If you look inside of the package.json, you can see there are a few scripts. So there's a serve script. This is a Webpack hot reloading, auto refreshing dev server. Build will actually generate your static app. Lint will run ESLint. You can see here that it's using this vue-cli service. This is the thing that is basically all the magic behind not having to eject your config, being able to install plugins. That is all the magic right there. You can see all our other dependencies listed. And when in my setup, I told it to put my configs in my package.json. So you can see ESLint configuration is here, post CSS, all that stuff is inside of there. Two main folders here. Source is where all of your Vue.js app will live. If you look at main.js, this might look a little familiar. So the app is using ES 2015 import-export syntax. So not all browsers support that. So part of the build process is to turn this into something that browsers can understand. But as you're coding, you'll be using import-export syntax. You can see here that it's creating a Vue instance, passing in the router in the store, and then it has this render function. And then it's using mount to put it specifically on an element with ID app. very similar to what we did earlier, but a few other things in there. Thing to note here is with this Vue.js application, you only have one Vue instance. You have one Vue instance at the top, all of your components live below that. In the Vue docs, as a beginner, it can be a little bit confusing because you see this new Vue instance all over the place. That's really just showing how it would work, but think of a Vue instance as like a standalone Vue application. And if you're wondering where element with ID app is, if you look in the public folder, there is an index file, and this is the thing that actually gets served up. So you can see here it has a div with ID app, and you see in this comment, the dev server is going to automatically inject all of the CSS and JavaScript that I need for this app to run, but it's going to use this file as the base for that. Cool, let's start it up. npm run serve. Cool, so it starts up the dev server on localhost 8080, and there is our Vue.js app. Because I chose the option for routing, it just generates it with like 2 basic routes, like home and about. And there are some other things in here, and I will talk about them soon. Questions, thoughts, comments about this, or anything else? Cool. So let's talk about directives. So you saw some of these, but basically Vue comes built in with these directives that allow you to build applications fairly quickly and add certain things like conditional logic or looping over elements. So the first one I'll show you is vif or velse. And so when you generate an app, your app.vue is your main entry point. So for right now, I'm just going to comment out everything inside of it, and we're just going to do some basic stuff in here. Yeah, let's just create like an h2 that says is awesome. And I'll talk about in a minute what you're actually looking at here. This is a single file component, but for now I'm just going to gloss over it so we can get something going. So the first thing is some data. So I want to have some Boolean property on my data, which if it's true, we're going to show is awesome, but if it's not true, we won't show is awesome. So inside of a Vue component, your data is typically a function that returns an object. When I showed that demo earlier, it was just an object, but the idea with components is that they are reusable. And so if you think about it, if you want to reuse a component, you don't want that state to be the same for all of your reuses. You want them to be a new copy or like a brand new state that can be worked on. So that's why this should be a function that returns an object. Right now this is like the longhand syntax, but because we are in like the latest and greatest JavaScript, we can create a function that instantly returns an object like that. And then let's say we have a property on here called is awesome, and this initially is true. And so now in my Vue, if I want to use that vif directive, I can say vif is awesome. You'll notice that my editor is actually recommending is awesome, like it knows that that is a property on my data. This is because of an extension called vter. Someone remind me at the end and I'll spell it out for you so you can see how to install it. But this is another great thing about Vue.js. Specifically this extension with VS Code just makes your life way, way easier. You get autocomplete on component props, you get autocomplete on like things like this. It's a beautiful thing. So what we're saying here is, if is awesome on my data is true, we're going to show this element. So let's see it happen. Is awesome. Cool. But if I change this to false, we don't see it. But there also is a directive called velse, and you can use these in conjunction. So you can throw a velse here, and basically that says if this one is not true, it's going to render that one. So if I say this, now we see not awesome. I'll also show you the Vue DevTools. So the Vue DevTools actually give you a look into what are all of your components, and then you can also see the state of the component. So in here you can see that is awesome is false, but I can change this to be true. It actually updates under the hood, and you can see that it changes like that. So this is really great for debugging and just like seeing what your state is and how to change it and things like that. There's a lot of other stuff here. So like if you're using Vuex, there's tools very similar to like Redux Logger in here, all kinds of cool stuff in there. Some of the other directives are things like v-for, so if I want to loop over some data and show all of it on the page. So let's say right here I have a div, and on my data I'm going to have just an array of data. Let's just call this people. What's your name?
Butter. B-A-D-R.
B-A-D-R.
Yes.
Butter. Cool. Jason. Is it Chase?
J-A-S-E.
Jace, not Jace. Okay. Cool.
Alan.
Alan. I was going to say. Forgot your name.
Lindsay.
Lindsay. Okay, that's enough names. I'm sorry for reading it all out. Okay, so we have these people on our data, and let's say I want to show a list with each of their names. This is where v-for can come into play. So let's actually do an unordered list. Then we have a list item. But this list item is the thing that I want to repeat for every piece of data inside of this array. So for that, I can use the v-for directive. So I say v-for person in people. So the thing on the right-hand side of in must be something on your data. So we see people is on my data, and people is here. This, I can call it whatever I want. You're essentially naming each thing inside of the array, so I'm calling it person. And then now, inside of the element, I have access to this person, so I can just render it out. So here, I'm just going to use handlebars and say person, like that. This should work, but I am going to get some warnings. So there it is. They exist on my data. I can see all of them on the page. But if we look at the console, I don't know why it's not showing me the error. But you can see my editor is telling me expecting to have a key binding. So basically, we need to tell the virtual DOM how to differentiate between each of these people, so that way when it updates, it knows how to update them. Right now, all of the names are unique, so I'm actually just going to say the key here is person, and it stops complaining. In a real-world app, you really wouldn't want to do that. You would want to have your key be something like ID, which is is unique for everything, and these would probably be objects, but basic example of repeating over some data. Cool. And then you can also handle user input. So let's do this. I think I've got time, I've got like 20 minutes. I'm going to make a simple app where you can search for GIFs, because that will allow me to demonstrate a lot of things. Let me look at my slides really quick. So there are all of these directives. So I showed you these. I'm going to go through this, and then I'm going to build the app. V-on event is for listening for events. So like if you want to know when something was clicked on. So let's say, so v-on click, and then you can specify a function that you want to run when this thing was clicked on. So let's just say like alert name, and we can actually pass in the person here. Now, where is this alert name? I have to define it. So inside of your Vue component, you can have your methods here. I could say alert name, takes in a name, and then just literally does like a JavaScript alert with that name. And that should work. So now if we click on a name, Butter, Jason, Jace, cool. And all of the DOM events that you can think of work like this. A shorthand for this is to do @click instead of v-on, so a lot of apps will see people just do that. It means exactly the same thing. And you'll notice my editor is being very helpful. If I do @ these are all of the events that you have access to. So mouse down, mouse enter, any sort of DOM event you can tap into and run some method or something on your Vue component. vModel is for binding inputs. I'll show that when I show how a search box would work. You can do class bindings, style bindings, and then here I have the shorthands. So vBind is a way of basically telling Vue that, hey, this attribute here should actually run this expression to get back a value rather than just being the string URL. But the shorthand for that is just colon. And I showed this shorthand. You can do v-on, or you can just do the @ sign. Cool. Questions on this? Cool. There is a question in the YouTube chat. What is v-show? So I didn't exactly show that one. One thing to note about vif is if this is false, that element will be completely and totally removed from the DOM. And let's actually see that. Yeah. So right now, let's keep it true. And so in our app, we should see is awesome. If we look in the Vue DevTools, is awesome is true, but if you look in the DOM inspector, that element obviously is there because you can see it. But if we change this to false, the element, we can't see it, but if you look at the DOM inspector, it's also not in the DOM at all. So vif will actually remove it from the DOM if it's false. vshow is a way of just setting display none. So if I do vshow instead of vif, now it's, you can't see it, but it's still in the DOM and it's display none. So you can choose between vshow and vif whether or not you want to actually remove it from the DOM. Interesting thing to note, I did not have to refresh my browser. You'll notice that the state here is true, but when I updated that, it stayed false. It didn't do like a hard refresh. That's because of hot reloading. So if you change one single component file, your whole app doesn't refresh, just that one little part of the app that changed refreshed, which is pretty sweet. Okay, what else? Yeah, components. Let's kind of talk about what we're looking at here. So typically in an app built with a front-end framework, you want to break it down into some sort of component hierarchy. You might have navbar, you might have menu with subcomponents, which are like menu items, or you might have articles, which has subcomponents called article. But typically you're building kind of like a hierarchy of components, passing data down, calling functions to change things, which then pass data back down. But typically you're building on a flow like this, and you can do that with Vue.js. So typically this is kind of just like pseudocode, but your app might look like this. You have like an app nav component that encapsulates all of the navigation code. You have potentially an app view where like you're using slots here to render in a sidebar and content. And you can break down your app in that way. If you're using just like Vue in the browser like I was showing earlier, to register a component, you say vue.component, specify the name of your component. You can give it a template that is just a string. You would have a data property on here that is a function which returns an object if you wanted to have data. And then to use that component, you simply just put the name of the component. And then the props are also ways of passing down data. Let's build an app. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to comment out all of this. We're going to go back to the app that we were given. Okay, so this is what you get with the Vue CLI. I'm just going to add one more page here called GIFs. So right here, I need a router link. Let's call this GIFs. And then I need to actually add that route. So if I click here, nothing happens because I need to let Vue know what it should do when that route is chosen. So for that, I'm just going to create a component. You can see in this folder, they have two folders, views and components. Typically, views might be your top level components, like these are your routes. If you're using something like state management, these might be the things that are connected to the store. And then components here are very simple components that just take in props. But you don't have to do that. You can literally create any folder structure you want here. All of this works via like imports and exports. So as long as you know where things are and you can import or export them, you can create any kind of folder structure that you want. Typically, I prefer feature by folder, which was like popularized in like the Angular world, where you have like an about folder and it has all of the components associated with the about section of your app, and then you have a dashboard folder and it has all of the components associated with that. But you can really do anything you want here. But I want to put this one in the views folder. Let's call it gifs.vue. And here we have a single file component. So this component file has your template, which can be HTML. It has your script, which is JavaScript, and it has your style, which by default is CSS, but if I want to use something else, I can tell it. So I can say language is equal to, I think I installed Sass. Yeah, so now I can put Sass in that style. If I wanted to use CoffeeScript here, I could say lang equals CoffeeScript. I would have to install something that can understand it. I could also put TypeScript right here, but that's the beautiful thing about these single file components. Each of these sections can use whatever you want. By default, this uses HTML with handlebars. You could use Jade. You could even use JSX if you wanted to. So yeah, that's a thing. And now in my template, I'm just going to say GIFs. And now that I have this component, I'm going to register it with the router. So in the folder here, there's this router.js. This has all of my routes registered. There's my home route and my about route. So for this, I need to import the GIFs component from views/GIFs. And then I need to tell Vue what is that route. So a route has a path. We're going to say this is /GIFs. Route has a name. We're going to call this GIFs. And the component is that GIFs component. So who is cringing when I say GIFs with a soft G? Cool. And I mentioned it earlier, like you could have any folder structure you want, because wherever you're using those components, you just have to know the path to import them. So this could be in a deeply nested folder if I wanted it to, but now that I've imported it, I can now say that when the route is /GIFs, that's the component that I want to see. So now we see that component. Beautiful. Let's add some more stuffs. So I think initially I want like a search box where you can type in a search term. So let's put this whole thing in a div. One caveat of the template here is you can only have one root element. So you notice I started typing form, but then I would have had to put other things below it. You can only have one root element, so I'm going to put everything in a div. I believe with Vue.js 3.0 that's going to change, where you can have any number of things at the root, but that is one thing to look out for. So you have a form. We're going to have a label here that will just say search. We're going to have an input. Type is text. And then we're going to have a button that says go. What do we get? There you go. So we're going to type in kittens. We're going to click go, and we're going to get back some kittens and show them on the page. So the first thing is, I want to keep track of what the user is typing into the input here. This is where I would use the vModel directive. So here I'm going to say vModel equals search. Now the thing inside of the double quotes here has to reference some property on my data. And you'll notice right now there is nothing on my data. Cool, and I wanted to show you the errors because the error is actually really good. So this says property or method search is not defined on the instance, but is referenced during the render. So if you ever make like a typo or something like that, this thing is going to let you know, hey, you're referencing search, but I don't know where to find that. So to actually find that, we need some data. This is a function that returns an object. And then we can define search. And by default, like when the page loads, search is empty, so I'm going to default it to empty. But now, because I have this vModel here, as I start typing search, it's actually updating under the hood. So if I showed search right below it, you can actually see hello world. So as I type, it's bound to the data and it's automatically updating it so that I can use it in other places. Okay, now we want this go button to do something. So when this go button is clicked, we want to like submit the form. For that, we're going to use the events. So I'll say @submit. We're going to have a function called like search GIFs. And I'm going to make this button have a type of submit, so that way when this button is clicked, it submits the form. I now need on my methods a function called search GIFs. And for now, I'm just going to log hello. Does anyone know what's going to go wrong here?
It's going to reload the page because you didn't prevent default.
Yeah, because I didn't prevent default. So just like in a, like if you were doing this in vanilla or like building a form, if you submit a form, it tries to send the data somewhere. It's like cats. Page refreshes and like the thing goes empty. So typically, like in your function here, you would say like event.prevent default or whatever. Vue has a beautiful thing built in. You can just say .prevent.
Can you also do :prevent? I thought like there was like
this.
Yeah.
Maybe. Let's try it. Yeah, let's try it.
There was like another short thing for it that I saw.
that didn't work. No. But it's, I don't know if I have other, yeah, it's not giving me suggestions, but that's one of the really cool things about this. Like, if you ever use React, like, you have to prevent the default action like crazy, even though we're like using this front-end framework. This thing just has it built in, prevent, the page will not refresh now. So if I search for kittens, okay, hello, cool. So now what I need to happen is I need to make an API request to go get those kittens. For that, I have a URL I could use. Yeah, we're gonna use the Jiffy API. Let's just define a variable API URL. Set it equal to this thing, but we want the query to be on the end so we can make it dynamic. So Q equals whatever you want. So for this, I'll just use fetch, and we'll make this an async function. So let's say our response is going to be equal to await fetch with the API URL. And then on the end of it, we just want to put that search term. So I'm going to throw in this.search. So inside of your methods, if you want to access your data, or if you want to access your other methods, you use this. Typically, you don't have to worry about like weird binding issues. It all just works beautifully. If anyone here has used React, you know that a lot of times you have to make sure you bind it in the right place, or you're using an arrow function instead. This just works. Vue handles it. So this knows that when I say this.search, it's referring to the data. So this should call the API, and then we want some JSON from it. So we're gonna await response.json, and then let's just log that JSON. So we search for kittens. Did it work? Kittens. There we go. Okay, so it made the request, we got back some data, and there it is. Don't know why it didn't work the first time, but so this is making an API request, we're getting back the data. Now I actually want to use that data inside of my view. So let's define something on our data. Let's just call this GIFs. By default, we're just going to set it to an empty array. And then when we get back our data here, I'm just going to say this.gifs equals json.data. So data is the array of all the GIFs. And now that I have those GIFs on my data, I'm just going to repeat over them and show them all. I guess I could just repeat an image. We won't really worry about stylings. So I want to repeat this image for every GIF in the GIF array. We're going to say v for GIF in GIFs. And then here I want to bind the source to be something like GIF dot, not sure. So we're going to say GIF dot
ID?
Well, we want the actual URL.
Oh.
Yeah, so I think I'll do images and then fixed height small dot URL. Let's see what this would give me. That's too small. Let's do downsize medium. That's a decent size. Cool. So I want gif.images.downsize medium.url. Actually, I think I can just do copy property path. Cool. Yeah, so gif.images.downsize medium.url. Okay, so that should do it. We definitely want to set a key, as I mentioned earlier. Let's search for kittens. Go. There they are. Yay. But it is yelling at me, so in this case, I could just do key is gif.id, because though that should be a unique ID, so I want to bind the key to be gif.id. Cool. Just catching up on the chat. All right. Yeah, those are nice gifs. We did it. Questions or thoughts, comments about this example?
amazing.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so easy. It's so easy. Yeah, and so I think I have something in here. Let's actually talk about props really quick. So this is a way of like passing data from like a parent component to a child component. So let's say we want to encapsulate this section here to just be a component that accepts an array of GIFs. So that way this component won't have to know about how to make the request to get them. It just accepts an array of GIFs and shows them out. So let's create a new component. Call it GIF list. We'll scaffold the basic thing. I really just want to take this out of here and put it as my template. And then now on here, I'm just going to say props are GIFs. So this thing expects to receive a prop called GIFs, and then it's just going to repeat them out. So now this thing is a super simple component. It's just saying, given that I have an array, repeat over it and show all of those images. So now if I want to use this component inside of my other component, I first have to import it in. So we'll just import it. So we'll say import GIF list from, we need to go up to the components directory and grab the GIF list. Then I need to tell this component that, hey, GIF list is a thing. So you can specify components, which is an object. And here you can specify what's the name of the component that you're going to see in the template here. So we're going to call this GIF list. And then we point it to what is the actual component. I think that's the way to do that. Yeah. So that basically says now in my template, I am allowed to use this component called GIF list. So right here, I can just do GIF list. And so I've encapsulated that. Now I can just use it. But I actually do need to pass the data down. Let's see what happens if I don't pass the data down. I feel like I should get an error, like can't be for over undefined or something. But regardless, let's just, here we're going to pass down that data. So I'll say GIFs equals GIFs. So this is where that bind syntax comes into play. We're basically saying that the GIFs prop inside of this component, we're going to bind it to this expression. This expression resolves to this array. And so later on when that array changes, it will actually pass that data down. So there they are. And that's just showing like a parent-child hierarchy, like how do you pass data down to nested components. This could go infinitely deep. Lots of other stuff you could do there. Yeah, I haven't really mentioned or messed around with the styles here. One of the cool things you can do with Vue is if you put this scoped attribute on here, this essentially becomes styles that only apply to this component. So they won't leak out, they won't apply to other things. And yeah, it's essentially if you know that you might have like name collisions or something like that, throwing that on there ensures that your styles only apply to this specific element. Okay. I'm pretty much at my time commitment, so this was an example of like, create a talk item component, it receives the talk, its template uses the talk, and then we can just repeat that component multiple times. So kind of similar to what I just did. I mentioned it a little bit ago, but you can literally use any language you want inside of each of these things. So in this example, they're using Jade for their template. Just regular JavaScript here, and then using stylus for their styles. As long as you have that preprocessor installed, it'll just work. And the thing about it though, is this component that you define as a single file. Wait, is that it? That's it. So this component here actually gets transpiled into an ES 2015 module. So it's a module that has a render function and it has like its data on it. But we write it in this nice clean way, but when it actually gets built for the browser, it's just becoming an ES 2015 module, which is pretty cool. Mentioned it before, but you use what you know. That's what I love about it. You get that awesome hot reloading, you get scope CSS. It's a beautiful thing. Vue has lifecycle hooks, just like most other frameworks. So you have before create, you have created, you have before mount, you have mounted, you have before update. And all of these lifecycle hooks, if you want to tap into them, you simply just put them on your component. So if I want to do something when this component is created, throw the created method right there. And then now I could do something. Like if I wanted to actually make that API request when this component gets created, I would do it here. And yeah, you'll see that when the page loads, this is going to get logged because that lifecycle hook gets called. Hello, I'm created. So there's lots of other ones that you could tap into. This diagram goes into like what happens when or why you would want to use one over the other. Okay, showed a little bit about the router. One thing I'll point out is that the router is maintained by the core team. So one of the things that is really a pet peeve of mine working in React, because I work in React on a daily basis, React router isn't necessarily like the main router. There are other routers out there, and some of them maybe work better. But Vue.js router is maintained by the core team. As you saw earlier, you can scaffold it when you build out an app. So that's one of the things I love about it. Like it just works, and also like the setup is fairly easy. Like this one router file right here, it's pretty much all you need. You define your routes. You then in your main instance say, hey, that's my router. And then in your main component, you say all of my routes will get rendered here, and then router link is a way to link to other routes. It's as simple as that. Like if you've ever tried to set up React router or anything like that, it can sometimes be a pretty big mess. Yeah, there's all that. It's officially supported. It's a beautiful thing. And now just in terms of reactivity, so how is this actually working? So the interesting thing about this and about the app that we're building here is that we're actually like mutating state, right? So we have our initial state here, but anytime we want to update it, we simply just mutate it. Or in the case of like the search here, this is actually modifying the underlying value. But Vue is able to actually watch for changes here. It's using object.defineProperty, which essentially allows JavaScript to tap into when a property is retrieved or when it's set. And so when your component spins up, it essentially creates a getter setter for all of the properties on your data. And then the watchers get added anywhere that there is either like a template reference or like a method that's referencing that item. So the thing about that is it's actually watching in a very smart way. So by default, if I had a template that didn't reference any of my data, even if my data was changing, the view, the DOM wouldn't even try to update. So it allows you to be very smart about which parts of the DOM it decides to update and when they update. One thing I didn't show here is also computed properties. These are essentially, you define them as methods, but they can take in other properties, and then you could actually use them as, sorry, this is an object. Use them as properties in your template. But the cool thing about computed properties is that they only recalculate if the reference data changes. So if you've ever used like class getter setters in React, those things are changing all the time because it doesn't know how to know exactly when that thing changes. And your computed properties are really smart about that, which is cool. It uses the virtual DOM. It's a faster implementation than React, especially because of this specific updating and specific watching. So it's a beautiful thing. There are some limitations though. So like if you wanted to add a new property to your data, like let's say later on I want to add name here. If I just said this.name, Vue wouldn't know how to watch for it or know that it appeared. That's where you would have to use this.set, and that essentially informs Vue that, hey, I'm adding a new property here, so start watching it. But in Vue.js 3.0, you won't have to do that anymore, and I think also 2.6 Next uses proxies under the hood, so this caveat isn't there anymore. You can add properties all day long, and it'll still watch them for changes. Okay, that's a lot of stuff. There's state management I could talk about. I'll just point you to awesome Vue.js. It has tons of resources for learning Vue.js, component libraries, starter projects, utilities, all sorts of Vue.js stuff. All of that is there. Come to the Denver Vue.js Meetup if you haven't. I believe our next one is, I don't know when it is, but look on meetup.com, you can see when it is. And I also know what the talk is going to be. But you should show up, it's a fun, just community-focused thing. There's the Vue forum, there's a Discord chat for learning about Vue, there's a show and tell forum. And then Evan Yu, the actual creator of Vue.js, his sole job is to be the maintainer of this open source library. So right now he doesn't work anywhere, he literally just works on Vue.js. And currently on Patreon, he's getting close to $18,000 a month just from backers. Larger companies that are using Vue.js actually do support him, but he maintains Vue Router, Vuex, the dev tools, the CLI, and that's essentially like his main job. I guess I didn't mention this earlier, but that's another interesting thing about Vue.js is it's not backed by some large company. Like Facebook has React, Google has Angular. Vue is just totally open source. It was started by one guy. It's a huge community effort. There are larger companies that are helping to back it, but pretty much anyone has influence over newer features that are coming into Vue, different things like that, and it's not just being run by a company. Cool. Questions? Yes, sir.
What happens if Evan steps in front of a bus?
People always ask that question, but the thing about it is a big community. Like, let's just look at the number of contributors here. Yeah, so there are 274 contributors. They have an actual contributor core team. I think it's maybe 10 or 11 people, and they all, I mean, you can see he has the most commits here, but they all have equal say in things. And the other thing to note is sure he is like leading it, but it's a totally community-run thing. I believe, yeah, there's this request for comments repo where so Vue.js 3.0 will be out in about a year or so, and it will have breaking changes in it. But they have issues here for every single breaking change that's going to appear. And so anyone from the community can go in and comment and say, hey, I'm using this in my app and this is how it's going to break it, or I would prefer this syntax. So even though he's the main guy, there's still just a ton of like community effort and support and participation towards the framework. So that's kind of my answer to it. Like, if he goes away, I'm sure someone else from the core team could step up. But the majority of what I've seen is just a huge community effort. And so like the community drives the new features, they drive the bug fixes, and it's not really just one guy. Other questions? Yeah.
Would you explain slots?
Sure. So slots are a way of making a custom component that can render data that you pass into it. So let's just create like a simple example here of like we'll create our own custom button component where the outside world can actually specify like what the text of the inside of the button is. So let's create like a my button component. This is just literally going to be a button, but what we want right here is a slot. So what this is saying is from the outside world, when I use this component, whatever you specify as a child is going to get rendered right here. And this is just like basic slots. You also have named slots, but I'll show real quick how to use this thing. So like, let's say on our about page, I want to use the my button component. I will need to add a script. I'll need to import that my button component. And then I need to let it know about it. I think earlier I specified the name manually. I think I can do this, and it automatically knows that I can do this.
You can do that.
Okay, cool. So a slot essentially says, okay, because I'm using this component right now and I'm specifying hello world right there, in my component definition, the slot tells it where it should render that. So now if we look at this and go to about, we see that it says hello world. So a slot is essentially a way of taking in data. You can also have named slots. So if I like name this value. And so now over here, if I wanted this to actually be set there, I would have to specify the slot in which it goes in. Right now, there's nothing because it doesn't know what to do with the hello world that I'm passing in. Is this the syntax? Do I do like slot?
You do like a span slot.
Okay, so you have to specify an element and then you give it a slot property and say that this is value.
Yeah.
And then this tells it, hey, this should be rendered right here where the name is value. There you go. So this is really just great for like building reusable components. It's definitely used like in component libraries where you have all kinds of different like variations of buttons that you might be using. Yeah, different things like that. Hopefully that was explained well enough. Other questions? I would not be offended if you asked another one. Okay, let's check on YouTube. Yossi says, your font/theme is awesome. The one downfall is the JS in the template literals. What? Okay, so there's a question from Himanshu. Why is Webpack used? It sounds good though. The main idea here is building apps that ultimately when they're delivered to an end user are like as small as possible. So I think I'll end on this note. Like, let's actually build the app. So right now I've been serving this through the dev server, but if I wanted to deploy this to a static server somewhere, I would first need to build it. And building it basically takes these component files and these JavaScript files and turns it into JavaScript that the browser can actually understand. Essentially transpiles it into ES5. And Webpack is the manager of all of that. Babel is the actual tool which will do the transpilation, but there are Webpack plugins that tell Webpack how do I turn this thing into a JavaScript module, or what do I do if they import a CSS file, which you can actually do. But by default, you get this build script. So if I say npm run build, that's actually going to use Webpack to just bundle everything up and make it nice and distributable. If you look in the package.json, there is that build script. It's just calling the vue-cli service to do it. And it's done, and it actually generates this folder called dist. And you can see it has multiple JavaScript files and CSS. But the interesting thing about them is they are minified and concatenated. So they're as small as possible, so that way when your website is loading, it's the minimum number of assets, it's the smallest number of characters. Like even our index.html is all on one line, just to reduce the amount of white space and like the bytes going across the wire. If you look at our JS, we can see that it's actually split up into multiple things. You can see that there's this about.js. This is actually our about component that got transpiled. But the reason that is in a separate file is because in our router, we basically told it to lazy load. So the interesting thing about that is if a person never goes to the about page, they never have to download that JavaScript file. But the moment they go to the about page, Vue will automatically, or the browser will automatically load in that JavaScript file. But this is why we use something like Webpack, to turn this app of nicely readable, easily written code into something that's not very easy to read, but is very small, and we can deliver it to end users. Cool. Any other questions? Awesome. What else do I have? Yeah, nothing. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Well, thank you everybody for coming out. Again, we're the first Thursday of every month, so you can put us on the calendar. Next month will be Angular, and then taking July off. But big shout out to Code Talent. I'm sure if you go to meetups, you've probably been to a meetup here. They offer their space, they offer their beer, and we'll talk to them about offering non-alcoholic options as well. But they're amazing. I've worked with them in the past on the gig, so really nice guys. One more big hand for CJ. And thank you guys for coming out. Hopefully we'll see you next month.
Thanks.
So what front-end talks happen?